Now, as everybody knows, the existential problem for Wellington is housing. It's their number one, more than leaks, more than transport, more than carbon emissions, more than anything else I could think of is housing. So I'm glad that the city councillors have taken the relevance and importance of this to heart and have turned up on time and en masse. But we'll hand over to Paul to start the ball rolling.
Morena councillors, and thanks, Tim. I get. Maybe move the bell now. Yeah, I think he likes that bell, doesn't he? You'll recall in June of this year we brought you the Housing Action Plan for the next 3 years. And just as a bit of context, the Housing Action Plan sets out a list of tangible actions that we're going to deliver on and activities that we're going to deliver on to deliver on our 10-year housing strategy. As part of that 3-year cycle, officers every 6 months will report back to council to basically give you an update on our progress towards those actions. And our first update in this 3-year cycle would have been in December, but with the timing of committee meetings in the lead up to Christmas, we are bringing a paper to you on the 30th of November. And so the purpose of this morning's workshop is to provide you with an update on some of those actions, to get some clarity and agree some of the action plan amendments that were made in the June committee meeting. And overall, the intent is to facilitate a seamless approval of the update that we bring to you on the 30th of November. The workshop's going to be broken into 2 halves. I'm not going to profess to be the expert on all of the things in the Housing Action Plan, so we've got all the relevant people in the room. The first half of the workshop, you will hear from several officers that will be discussing the State of Housing project. We'll also be trying to clarify some of the amendments and share some of the new Housing Action Plan targeted timeframes for those amendments that came in the June paper. You'll have an opportunity to ask councillors questions on each of those projects and programmes as we go through. And then the second half of the workshop will be dedicated to the progress towards our homelessness actions. The Housing Action Plan work is being led by Hayley Moslin, who's our housing strategy lead. And I just want to thank her for her efforts in bringing this workshop together. And just to kick things off, we'll hand over to Joe Hewitt, who's the manager of City Insights, and he's going to present the State of Housing project for you.
Okay. Green light's on. Yeah, good. Yeah, I see. Fabulous stuff. So as I've already been introduced, I won't repeat that little bit again. Good morning, everyone. So I'm here to talk to you about what's on the screen, so I'll just rock on and we'll take some questions at the end. So the purpose of this... is that on? Oh, yeah. It looks like it's on. Oh, yeah. Oh, it almost worked. I'm going to try it one more time. Here we go. So the purpose of our State of Housing work is to, I think, like the title suggests, try to get a good understanding of what housing is like in Wellington from a city-centric perspective. And there are a number of dashboards that have been developed in this space, which can help us give us insights into that, like this national one, and more recently the regional Leadership Committee has developed a housing dashboard, which allows us to see some data sets at a city level and compare that throughout the region. What we're trying to do is understand that in more detail at a city-centric level, and there's a lot of data sources that are out there, but making sense of all that and finding out and understanding what it's actually meaning and displaying that in different ways so we can interpret it more easily. It's kind of like trying to find the gold nuggets in there. Bit of a needles in a haystack exercise is what we found as we worked through this. Some of the kind of headline stuff that we'll be reporting is obviously getting a sense of some of the key metrics. So, the city's GDP around about 30 billion per annum. The city's population over 210,000 now, and we live in around 75,000 houses. 40% of those are rented. Those are very clearly headline statistics at a point in time. You'll notice that some of the data sources there, vary in time. A lot of them go back to the 2018 census, the 2023 census. I hope you all filled in earlier in the year. When we get our hands on that in another 12 to 18 months, some of this data will be updated. But just kind of using that to illustrate that there are definitely different timeframes around all sorts of data sources, and trying to understand the picture at a point in time, is important, but it's obviously not all the story. So that's what we're trying to do with this, is trying to understand it better. So our particular problem that we're trying to address with this piece of work is understanding the depth and breadth of Wellington's housing crisis, any supply and demand imbalances in there, affordability issues that we understand, and understanding that spatially in the city as well, and whether those things are getting better or worse. That's a lot of good stuff to know, and bringing it together is what my team is focusing on at the moment. So the idea is to provide some good perspectives around that, and compare that regionally and nationally. We want to have that information displayed in a way that's interactive and accessible, and so in the long run it will better inform the policy advice. To date, we've explored something like 100 indicators, and we prioritised 42 of those, which we'll give you a few insights onto in a sec. So just looking at what some of the products we're trying to display, really, things like this. So this is a view of the Sense Partners population projections, and this is showing projected housing density. And so you're seeing on this map that there's a lot of density focused in the central area, much less through kind of that Newtown area, but all areas of the city are expecting to see some increase in density, and this is through the settings that are going through in the district plan review, right? Another one of our many indicators is using census data for damp and mould, and by putting this through the map thing, you can click on a particular area, and you can see on this slide that there's a little pop up in the corner for the area that's highlighted in Karori, which reports the percentages of damp and mould in that particular area, and the number of households also in that area. And so you'll be able to click on any particular area of interest and discover what's going on. Another one is the overcrowding reports in a similar kind of way. The darker colours are areas that are reporting high levels of overcrowding. And those things were obviously snapshots at a point in time. Those were kind of census views. This is kind of a temporal view looking at changes in rental prices across time from a different data source. And I know you're all really keen to see that detail, but I'll move on. So this stuff will be becoming available by the end of the year. That's the whole idea, is to make that stuff more accessible and more available. Just to try and bring that together in what we're attempting to frame this piece of work in. Is this kind of framework view where we've got a number of city context indicators and stuff around the housing and the quality and living standards, the affordability and cost dimensions, which is obviously important in terms of the affordability and things, and city people's perceptions of neighbourhoods and other related matters, which influence the way people kind of feel about the city. All those things are important in trying to understand that story. So the interactive report is really what we're trying to do, and put a curated story around that. So try and find the gold nuggets in that haystack, right? Tracking changes over time, trying to understand those long-run and short-run trends, and being able to visualise that through the use of charts and maps, allowing us to drill down and filter it as much as the data allows us to, and making those data sources kind of easily available for people. So, in other words, having a place where you can see what all your sources are and go and find them and play with that yourselves if that's what you want to do. and eventually the regional and national benchmarking kind of views will be brought in as well. So just in terms of where we're at with it, by December, those initial 40 indicators across those first 4 kind of theme areas, we expect to go live with that in terms of a kind of website availability. And then throughout next year, we'll be doing or developing the benchmarking and perceptions kind of indicators as well. So that's the update on where we're at with that very interesting piece of work. I invite questions.
Thanks very much for this. Can we have a look at the list of parameters that you actually used for this, the 41
Yeah, I can.
determinants?
I'll circulate that to you.
Great,
Sure.
thank you.
Thanks. I really want to see those stats in more detail. The one at the beginning, Joe, which showed the density in 2043, can you just go back to that one?
The nice 3D one, yep.
I won't make
Sorry.
a gender stereotype about myself, but, you know, reading maps isn't my strong point. So that, obviously mostly in the central city, you said it's not so dense out at Newtown. So can you just orient?
Well, essentially, all I was commenting on is what we're trying to show with this visualization is the density, and the higher the bar, the more dense in that particular area unit that we've used as kind of the benchmark or the base mapping place. And so the bars are highest around the central area and not so high in the Newtown area.
Are we able to get that data with the suburbs on them so we can see all over the city what it's...
Yeah, so this is pulled from the Sense Partners data. Yeah.
Yeah. And it will be, sorry, you meant it will be publicly available, the Sense Partners data?
All the data that supports this work will be able to be publicly available. I mean, we're basically only using publicly available data sources.
Okay, so, sorry, I mean, like, will you be able to go onto a council website and look up population data?
That's our expectation, yes.
Lovely.
Yes. So first of all, simple question. These aren't future building heights, are they?
No, not at all. No, this is a visual representation of population density. Certainly couldn't be. Well, it could be misconstrued as representing building heights, but that would clearly be wrong.
I just look at the very high one near the railway station. The more serious question is, you know, in the direction we've sort of got 2 directions in population growth. One is sort of just business as usual, which is in the spatial plan, but there's also this future direction on a population spine along the MRT route to Island Bay. Are there also projections for that should it go ahead? Is that part of the work?
I don't. Well, I mean, this is the 2021 review of that material. We will be able to put in here the latest available stuff that's available publicly for these viewers. If some of that stuff's not yet available, then the information is only as good as we can get at a point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so most of this data is already published. The difficulty is it's not in particularly accessible forms for people to understand. The reason why we have chosen to publish these projections is because they are the ones that your LTP is based on, and so they're of critical importance that Wellingtonians understand them. As the situation with things like Let's Get Wellington Moving and other scenarios firm up, they will enter the Sense Partners projections, but at the moment they sit off to the side, and the reason for segregating them is they're so dependent upon further decisions being made.
On top of the list. So I just want to check, it's probably not the time, but I've got questions about, for example, our consenting rates as compared to other. So will I have an opportunity to get some information around that as part of this briefing?
There is a section on consenting. Yeah. So.
Beautiful.
Sorry, because of time.
So I think Hayley, the housing strategy lead, will update us now. I think you're Mike Healy.
Okay, perfect. Wanted to address one of the actions that were added to the Housing Action Plan back in June. So if you recall, when we presented the Housing Action Plan, we had just over 20 new actions added through councillor amendments, and one of those was to produce targets for some of those new items that were added. I want to acknowledge that some of those items did already have timelines aligned with them, so target timelines. Some are aligned with LTP processes, and some were just included in the wording of the amendment. So today I just wanted to present, represent some of the pre-reading that you had in terms of those timeline targets for those that didn't have timelines on them. So there's roughly about 8 of those. And we really just wanted to socialise these with you early because we will be seeking your approval for those timeline targets in the November committee paper on the 30th of November. So as I said, there was, in the pre-reading, there was those 8 timeline targets proposed and the rationale by the various officers that are responsible for delivering those targets. And it's represented up here on the screen as well. So we can see that the red writing and the red arrows are essentially officers proposing the timelines for those new actions. I have the various officers in the room that are responsible for the different targets, so happy to take questions on any of them specifically here today.
I've got a zillion questions, but I'll just do 2.
Okay.
The rental inspection scheme, which I'm very enthusiastic about. So basically, sorry, can you just remind me, it's to do it with MB. Will they literally just go out and talk to people who have indicated they want to be spoken to?
So we have.
How's it going to work? Because we haven't actually seen the detail.
That's okay. Helen's here to
Thank
speak
you,
to that
Helen.
one for us.
Yes, good morning. So the way it's going to work is we'll take the referrals in from members of the public. We've worked with MB for a threshold for referrals, so the most serious ones will be referred on to them. MB will then take the matter over and deal with it as they would normally. So we're helping to triage the cases. The ones that aren't as serious enough to refer on to MB, a lot of the time it's just officer advice on the tenant's next course of action.
I think when we brought this to the table, the idea was to go in and not just go after the worst ones, right, where there were obvious compliance ones, but yeah, to kind of go, okay, look, might be the middle part, and here's how to make it better. So will that officer advice be able to cover that?
Depending on the resources allocated to it, yes.
Well, if you could respond to me an email for the LTP, because
Certainly.
I would like to resource that properly. Hayley, my other issue of close passion, which you know all about, is the earthquake-prone buildings. So we did, because it is a housing issue, we did get something in there in the consenting one. How are we going to make sure that we meet our legal obligations, but whilst not putting enormous stress on homeowners as the deadline approaches in 2027?
Yeah, so my understanding that there was an additional action added. I think it was letter T or Q, which asked for a report back specifically on that, and I understand that may be coming in November. And then there is also another report back coming back from the earthquake-prone building team, how council will be supporting owners or otherwise to meet their deadlines. What's council's role in that?
As we know, some of them will not meet them, and then what's the, is the council, I was just rereading the Act, is the council going to offer notices to fix and then charge people up to $200,000 for not fixing? So that's just some information would be helpful.
Yeah, so those are a couple of council's, regulatory tools, and so the committee paper will detail more information on that.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Hey, I'm also quite interested in the inspection scheme. So my first question is, I see there is an arrow and a dot with Feb 24 on there. What precisely is coming in Feb 24, and is there anything before that?
This will, obviously, we need to determine what resources we're going to need, and that will have to feed into the long-term plan process. So we're aiming to get a calculation of potential resource requirements before Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah.
For approval in 24.
Yes.
Okay, sweet.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Next question. So I understand we're performing mainly a triaging role, and then if it's serious enough, passing it over to MB. If not, just send them an email saying go to the Tenancy Tribunal. Is there any part of this where we're utilising those powers under the Health Act by acting as health inspectors?
There may be some limited arenas to use the Health Act, and but the main tool sits with MB under the Tenancy Tribunal.
Okay, so council's not rocking up in the high-vis.
No.
Sweet. Final question. Speaking of the Health Act, under the third point there's red writing saying by June 24. What by June 24? Is it just that whole stock take that's being presented in June 24?
Yeah, if we were to be allocated resources as part of the LTP process, then that would be in time for the next new financial year.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, you're right in the point that collection of review of multiple legislation will be reviewed. That collection will be reviewed and provided at the June update in 2024. So that will include the Health Act as well as the other two pieces of legislation that impact rental.
My question is, again, about the inspection service, but also is it to check the connections between the advocacy organisations, and, say, council's relationship with community law, advocating for tenants, because I think that is an important part of that kind of process, because for tenants to feel safe to proceed with action against their landlords, that, to feel that they've got some ongoing support.
Yep, absolutely. So we've already had a meeting with Renters United. We've reached out to Community Law, Vic University, Otago University, who has some useful data that we're going to look at. So really strengthening those partnerships with those advocacy groups.
Beautiful, thank you.
I'd like just to clarify that is definitely the purpose of this, is to socialise some of these questions that you may have, so that when we come to the November paper that we can answer them more fully for you.
If we're moving on to compliance, can I just ask a question about the affordable housing section? Just on the Te Kāinga program, have we got an actual update on that? Because I guess what is hard for us to measure, and I know that the target was definitely question marks around council laws and officers' advice, but have we got a way to track how we are measuring that?
Yeah, look, I'll bring you guys an update within the November paper on the Te Kāinga programme, and I guess without going into too much detail right now, because obviously we're in some commercial negotiations, we are working towards adding supply to the Te Kāinga programme, and I think at the moment there may be about 250 units that we're in negotiations for. In addition to that, the current buildings that we have are now fully occupied. And so, yeah, we also had our tenant satisfaction survey, which had 95% of our tenants happy and 82% saying they're getting value for money. So very, very good positive news, but I'll report back in more detail in the paper.
That's really great. Thank you.
Next topic, I think. Is that right?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, so the next topic was around the consenting and compliance, specifically the action which requested, Sorry, where am I? That's right. Requested advice around how the consenting function can support those developers who are wanting to provide social and affordable housing, as well as those owners of earthquake-prone buildings. We don't have a specific presentation, but you'll note there was a bit of pre-reading and some context and some definitions that we shared with you. Unfortunately, Rebecca, who is the lead of this, is away today, but we do have Hayley Wiseman, who's the manager of resource consents, here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Hayley. I've just been having a very interesting conversation with Moana about how people can't get more than one extension if they need more time on their building consent. And so I'm just helping a school at the moment where there's a strong public good element. What can we do about being more flexible for developers or, building owners, whilst making sure that they're still compliant with the code, because it's not helpful for them to have to pay 2 lots of fees?
Unfortunately, that's not my skill set, but that's okay. I can get the answer. I can ask Chris for you, and I'll get him to email you. Yep.
My question may not be a Hayley question either, but it might be a Liam question. I guess I'm interested in why our consenting rates continue to be so low compared to other jurisdictions. Someone messaged me this week about compared to Hutt City, and I'm interested to know, to hear some of the factors behind that and anything that we can do to shift the dial in terms of the housing being built in Wellington.
Are you meaning the number that we process, or
the number of dwellings that are being consented as a but as a signifier of actual additions to the housing stock in Wellington?
Okay, so I can answer this from a resource consent point of view. So our district plan is very permissive, which may be the reason why the consent numbers aren't that high. In the last 3 years, we have processed 500 resource consents in terms of residential adds and alts, new builds, etc. We process about 800 resource consents a year. So I think that's probably the answer. I don't know the Hutt City plan, but it may be.
Yeah, I mean that's so the consenting numbers are about 3,000 building consents a year and about 1,000 or so, depending on the year, resource consents. The intensity of development's kind of and the value of the development is often something we focus on. But Hutt are correct; they have a lot more residential land that is more easily developable than the city for the various, the obvious reasons that we have a town belt and an outer green belt. We are a compact, dense city. The volumes of consenting for residential are lower. We're in a bit of a lull anyway. But of course, if you looked at our commercial consenting numbers, our floor area and our cost of development is through the roof compared to Hutt. So, on a value basis, from a GDP point of view, we punch a lot higher. But from a residential housing point of view, it's a lot harder to build housing in the city, which is why this housing action plan has such a strong focus and a multi-team approach. So we've got probably 5 or 6 departments here, all contributing to the housing action plan update, which relates to dealing with the thematic issue of housing, because you can get it consented, but can you get it built? And then when you get it built, is it safe? Is it healthy? Is it warm? Is it rented? So this is why the housing action plan is being developed in such an integrated way. I hope that answers your question. But the facts are the facts. The consenting numbers for houses are slightly lower than Hutt.
Can I a follow-up question? Would you expect the new district plan to lead to some improvements for Wellington City?
Yes, I do. And I think Hayley can comment on the type of pre-applications we've had already as a result of the lifting of the heights and the freeing up of some of the controls we had in place prior, view shafts, etc. So, and of course, Council's decision around the heritage areas, or the character areas, I think we call them. So I think that's having a positive impact. I think the MDRS has has had a positive impact. The medium density residential standards brought under the last government, and this council's obviously embraced. And I think the NPSUD, obviously directing us to do what we've done in our district plan has made a positive impact. But Hayley, you might want to talk on the ground what you've been experiencing.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people coming in for pre-apps, just sitting back waiting for the PDP to become operative. So they've got these, wonderful schemes that they're just sitting back waiting for the PDP, because obviously the road to consenting will be much easier that way.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you.
This is a question for Liam. How many consented properties never get built? Do you know? Do you have that offhand, so that people would actually apply for something and then change their minds?
Conversion rates, Hayley, I'm not sure. From my previous role, it was about a 60-40 conversion rate, but it could be quite different.
That's probably about right. Quite often you'll find that will approve a resource consent, which they never apply for a building consent. That's not that often. So Liam's probably on the money there, but the 60-40, yeah.
Great. And do we actually ever find out why this is, like getting an understanding of why we're not building more houses?
We don't actively go out, but from chatter, it's usually the market. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Just a quick question. Are you hearing any discussion around insurance when people are coming to talk about resource consent and what people are finding in the market?
No, not offhand.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. Next.
Thanks, Hayley. So now we're going to move into the homelessness section of the workshop. So I'd like to invite David Ensel to join us.
Kia ora. Deputy Mayor, how are you? Kia ora, thank you very much for having us. Can I introduce Millie Lambis to you first? Many of you probably know Millie in her community connector role. Millie has moved into a harm prevention advisor role and is transitioning into the harm prevention team leader position and will be responsible for delivering a lot of this really important work. So I'm thrilled that Millie could be here to help us with this presentation this morning. We also have a couple of others around the room as well. Alice, Ash, sorry, I got confused. There is both an Alice, Ash, and an Ash here. So Alice is providing you with some extra information that will help with the interactive part of our workshop this morning, and there are a few other members of the team here as well who will support the group activity that we have coming up. Okay. Perfect. So what we are talking about is the work that you asked us to do earlier in the year around building on our response to homelessness in the city and how we can both how we can make sure that our response to homelessness is as effective as it can be, but also how we can be more clear and articulate more effectively the work that we're doing to respond to homelessness in the city, as well as to make sure that it is as effective and integrated as it can be. So over the next little while, a couple of the things that we're going through is to have a discussion to understand the nature and complexity of homelessness in the city, explore our role, the role of the council in responding to homelessness, and identify both a long-term vision and some of our initial priority areas for action over the next ideally 1 to 3 years as we kind of head towards that longer-term vision. These initial actions, we think, will help to form the building blocks for a longer-term kind of solution to homelessness in the city. We thought it was important as well to talk through how our response to homelessness fits into the wider kind of housing strategy and the purpose of making sure that we take an integrated response to dealing with all things housing. So the workshop on the Housing Action Plan was the appropriate place to have a conversation about homelessness. The Housing Action Plan is wonderful. It sets out how the council's vision for housing in the city. It sets a really clear guide for all Wellingtonians to be well housed, and it talks lots about how we can build more housing and how we can increase the supply and availability of housing. But where we think there is a gap is around how we support the people who are without housing and who because of the current lack of supply of and the right typology of housing for some people in really complex situations, there is a need for us to provide better support to people as well as to better articulate the support that we are providing under the Housing Action Plan, which comes with some all of the really important things that you need in a strategy, like reporting and governance and oversight, rather than sitting separately. We did, though, have a housing strategy in the past. It was called Te Mahana, and Te Mahana set a vision to end homelessness by 2020. In 2022, we undertook a review of Te Mahana, and we learnt some really good things as part of that work. So some of the really strong feedback is that the council support to partners, the coordination of the network meetings, they produced some positive results for some people who were experiencing homelessness, and that was tested really effectively during COVID, where the support to partners that we provided was praised and helped organisations to get through a really tough time. But the kind of overarching and the really strong outcome of that review found that Te Mahana as a strategy was not particularly effective. We worked really, really strongly and really well across the sector, and we achieved some really, really good outcomes, but those outcomes didn't necessarily align with the initial strategy. And so the work that we've been doing since you asked us to get started is really focused on the actions that we can take and the way we can, the impact that we can have. What's next? So on that, what Millie is going to do next is just talk through and highlight how our role as the council in responding to homelessness kind of spreads it across the spectrum of roles that we play. I forgot my words.
Thank you, and kia ora everyone. I guess as council, while we're undertaking this work, we need to acknowledge that there is work already happening. So the future planning is building on our current response and questioning if what we're doing in certain areas is the right response. So I just want to highlight some areas of what's currently happening. Council as a whole, in our roles, we play multiple different roles. So one as a regulator, and you can see that through the planning for growth, consenting, urban development. As a funder, we are a core funder for our local communities and organisations. We fund over 200 organisations. 6 of these do provide service directly to the most vulnerable and those experiencing homelessness. We are a partner, so you can see that through the likes of Pōneke Promise, DCM Outreach. They work very closely alongside our Hapaiaki team, directly with those more visible rough sleepers. And you can also see that through our funding for Te Pāmaru, which is very close to opening, and we're all very excited about that, for their intake to start early next year. One of the key roles I think I've seen is we are a facilitator, so we are bringing the networks together because we're quite unique here in Wellington. Being the size that we are, we have an opportunity to work really closely, and through that, the likes of our MDT and officers hui, where we bring frontline staff together to look at the creative ways to respond to some of the challenges we're seeing. An advocate is another key role that we play, and I think through this work and through the engagements we're undertaking from external agencies, an advocate to central government is a key role that they see us as council playing. So I'm really interested to learn more about how we can expand on that. And ultimately, we also are a provider, so we do provide things directly to the community through projects like Te Kāinga. We still own our social housing assets. We operate Te Wahia Whena, which is the community support hub directly on Manor Street, and services like our Hapaiaki team who are out on the street every day, who know by name some of our most visible rough sleepers. So I think we should be really proud of what we're currently doing, but definitely looking on how we can do better and make sure what we're doing is the best. So, yeah.
Cool.
Ray.
Yes.
Thanks very much. I'd like to really understand whether we really understand exactly why people are out sleeping on the street. I asked one of the people that I saw in the doorway about why he's actually out there, and he said, "Well, if you give me $5, I'll tell you." And so, but do we actually know? Like, do we understand what is the motivation to actually be there?
That's a really good question. We're coming up to that in the next couple of slides. So hold that thought, Ray.
Cool. Yeah,
So I've got a question. Kāinga Ora's provision of housing in Wellington has declined quite markedly in the last 3 years, looking at their statistics. And so, what do we know about that? If they are going to close a building or a facility and effectively, push those people out, I don't know where they went. Who coordinates that to make sure that those people aren't literally dumped on the street? And what pressure do we put on Kāinga Ora to remediate their shortcomings, given that, in Wellington, their provision of social housing is the lowest proportionately of anywhere in the whole of New Zealand. I mean, we're the most underprovided by central government, and is that part of our, sort of in our crosshairs, so to speak?
That is also a good question, but I wonder if it's okay with the group if we go through the presentation and we kind of, I think we can touch on a few of those things, and then we'll have any remaining questions we'll be able to answer.
So, yeah, hopefully some of these questions will be answered over the next few slides, but all really good points that I think we can easily talk to. Just so you know from where we've started and our approach to this piece of work, our approach really is ensuring that we're encompassing both the supply. So we all know we need more supply. We need the right type of supply in the right type of areas. The diversity of stock is a key theme coming out of this work. But alongside supply, and we've got a whole lot of more supply coming online over the next year, we need to ensure the provision of support is matching that increase in supply, because it's not quite as simple as having a roof over your head. It's ensuring you've got what you need to live under that roof and live safely. In terms of this homelessness work, is ensuring that balance, we get that balance right, especially for Wellington here. Some of the kind of key things we've gone through, one is initially we wanted to understand the drivers of homelessness. So for those that you would have experienced on the street, some of these drivers would come into play. So the three high-level drivers of homelessness is lack of suitable housing, and suitable being the key word. Unmet health needs, so many of the people you would have seen on the street, there's mental health, there's addictions, access to primary health, disability. Those are, if there's an unmet health need there, that is often attributing to decisions being made in situations that people are put into. And thirdly is systemic deprivation. So that's encompassing poverty, trauma, incarceration, colonisation, education, safety, and social connection. So encompassing a whole lot of stuff there, but when somebody doesn't have one or more of these things, or are experiencing one or more of these things, these are what are keeping people in or moving people into risky situations. So I just want to briefly touch on this. So this infographic, there is one on your table as well, just to help so you can see it a bit better. This is just our test to try and communicate exactly when we use the term homelessness, what do we mean? It is a spectrum, it is a continuum, however you want to put it, from the very visible, the rough sleeping side, to those that do technically have a roof over their head, but the situation isn't safe or stable. So this infographic is trying to capture that. The definition of homelessness that we use is living situations where people have no other option to acquire safe and secure housing. So that's this sort of the national term, the one that we use within Te Mahana. And so when we use that term, it's encompassing the unstable to very unstable situations. And that's pretty much what we have been responding to, definitely within the more community services lens. And those have been quite reactionary responses. And then within stable situations, we are quite interested, I think, to look at what is moving people out of stable and into unstable. What are those more preventative responses that we could be looking at? Because even if you own a home, if one of these drivers pipes its head up, you might be a family, but one of the incomes drops off because of a health condition. Our engagement with Tūwhatu Ora, that's a big one, of people in very stable situations, but a health condition comes into play. Maybe the savings aren't quite there, then these families are moving into very unstable situations. So when we say stable, if one of these three drivers comes into play, there's still vulnerabilities there. So it's really making it clear that those three drivers of homelessness is ultimately what moves people in and out of these situations. And lastly, before we get into our workshop today, which is the main thing that we want to talk to you about, because this is our opportunity to get your input before we put the final draft of recommendations and the final report together for the committee in November. Throughout this work and throughout our engagements, we have been looking at where are the gaps in our current system here in Wellington that are either keeping people in homelessness or unstable situations, or moving people from stable into unstable. So there's quite a full-on infographic in front of you as well. So these have been classed into the three drivers as well. And from these gaps and barriers, these are where we really want to hone in to see where council has opportunities to respond to, that we actually have the ability to, we have the levers to respond, because we know that this isn't an issue that we can or are meant to solve ourselves as a council. Within this, I've grouped ones with a green box around it. So these are areas that council are currently responding to in some way or another. It's not saying that the response to these is perfect. These are areas that maybe we need to respond better to as well, but it's just acknowledging that as we look at these gaps and barriers, council is responding already to many of them. So within the workshop that we're going to go into soon, we'll probably dig into this piece of paper a little bit further as well, and really keen to talk with you all about where you see council's priority, because it is a very complex situation when it comes to homelessness, and that's one of the key messages we're wanting to get across today, is that it is complex. So we really need to understand, as council, what is our responsibility to respond to these, or what are the areas that we can focus on, because we can't focus on all of them.
I think Millie has underestimated the work that the team have been doing in this space over the last few months, and that piece of paper that you have is complex and is complicated, and speaks to the intersections between different parts of the community, as well as the way the response needs to be integrated as well. And one of the things that we're really keen to get your views on is where you see the council having a role to play in responding to homelessness. and we'll be able to, when we get to the paper next month, we'll be able to talk to the feedback and where other agencies see both their part to play as well as where they see the council being involved as well. But this is a really good opportunity for us to hear from you around what you see as the role of our organisation, the council, and the current environment that we're in, and where you think we can get the best kind of value for the resources that we do have. We are about to move into a workshop that we do want to spend a good kind of 15-20 minutes with you on, but there were a couple of questions, and I'm not sure if we answered them as well as you needed to, or if you had any questions in the next couple of minutes that you think might help before we move into the interactive part.
Thanks very much. I'm finding this quite perplexing because it seems like the response is back. When I ask a question, I want to understand exactly what the problem is, and then it's only when I understand what the problem is that can I actually start thinking of solutions. But it seems like the responses back are so wide and varied that it's hard to identify exactly what it is. Now, one of the questions that I asked that cost me $5 was, if I could find you a place to live right now, would you take it? And so he said, well, you need to ask me another question. So I'm not sure whether I was being suckered into giving $5 for every question, but have we actually asked that question, and can we actually do that? Can we actually say to them, look, I'll find you a nice warm place. Can we actually do that? Are we able to have something?
As in we ourselves providing that warm space for them? Yeah, so if you're looking at the emergency housing, transitional and social housing space, a lot, I don't want to put, so through our engagement with the likes of DCM and even through Waihi Awhina, who engage and have relationships with the people directly on the street, majority of them do actually have a house or an address to go to. Even if that's emergency housing, and we know that there's a lot of troubles with emergency housing, that sometimes that's not the safest place for people to go. People may be choosing to be on the street because it's a safer option than the house that they actually have access to, or it's because that's where their social, that's their whānau, that's where they feel the most comfortable. There's a multitude of different reasons. If once mental health and addictions come into play as well, the decisions people are making to keep themselves in those situations.
If it was as simple as providing them with a roof over their head, I think we would have solved homelessness already. Yeah. But it's enormously complex, and the reasons why people remain homeless or why they fall into homelessness are. There are so many reasons why that could be. So there is no clear answer for that one, Ray. It's a very logical question, but the answer is not simple.
Is there any way we can actually categorise? Sorry. All right. Okay.
I'll be very quick, so then you can ask another question. You better rate. 5 is. Sorry, just really quickly, stats and data. Like, what have we got so that I know we can't segment people, but I really want to keep the people who are sleeping on a sleeping bag off the street. Like, that is just beyond the pale, obviously. But then, of course, there are all the other people who are not in secure housing.
We will include some stats and information in the paper when we present that next month. I was talking to DCM, who probably have the best view of rough sleeping in particular in the city, and they have worked in the last 3 months with around 150 people who have experienced rough sleeping. Around kind of 25-30% of those are new people, so there are still people falling into homelessness. Those people, that 150 people, have on average 3 complexities, 3 things that make life challenging for them, and require on average support to access the services of 3 different organisations. So there are still people who are falling into homelessness because of the complexities and the challenges that we've outlined. It's not a pleasant picture, but we will paint it in November.
So I won't ask my question about Kāinga Ora's under provision of buildings, because you're saying that the biggest problem isn't really the provision of suitable housing, it's the provision of services. So, if you were saying to us where we should be allocating our resources, is it in structures or is it in services? Where do you think we should be putting the City Council's priority?
Both is probably the answer to that question. There is there is growing supply. There is some really interesting support services coming on board. Things like Rolleston Street, which will provide wraparound services to residents. Te Pāmaru, which you've all visited and the council supported. I had a beautiful train of thought in my mind, and now I've lost it. But in summary, we need to be doing both. There are still not enough houses for everybody. There is still the wrong typology of housing. Most of the new public and transitional housing coming on board is apartment living, but there are a number of people who agencies are working with who would probably thrive if they could have a little cabin, a little hut somewhere a bit further away where they weren't disrupting the neighbours, where they could do their own thing. And they'd be quite happy there, but at the moment the options for them are apartments in buildings with neighbours. So we need to do both, and we need to we need to work with the sector to come up with innovative and creative ways to provide the right type of housing to the right person when they are in a position to be able to move into that.
If I could just answer the second part of your kind of question, we have a monthly interagency meeting with various entities throughout Wellington that includes Council, Kāinga Ora, MSD and HUD. And so that's the sort of situation where they would be able to inform us of buildings that were closing or coming online or coming offline. To date, that we've been represented at that meeting by our housing strategy lead. And I think maybe a logical thing might be to bring David's team in on those meetings as well going forward. David, you'd like to run a workshop with our councillors?
Well, we will crack on if that's all of your questions, and Millie will talk to that.
Oh, all good. Yeah, so this workshop is just more of an opportunity to, we'll probably break off into 3 small groups, and this is just our chance to really talk directly with you all and answer more questions and really discuss what we want to get out of you in this small amount of time. But the questions we're looking, will be around an aspirational, what is a city that doesn't have homelessness look like? What is that? But we then want to really pull that, what is our role as council? And then we really want to get further down, and from this, what do you see the priorities are? I understand that there is still a lot of unanswered questions and it is a complex space, but where do you think council fits in this journey of,
So what we will do now is pair up, just into small groups of 2. We've got a couple of the team who will come and just have a small chat with you. Really, this is the opportunity before we bring you a paper with our recommendations is to have the chance for you to give us some direction about where you see our role in responding to homelessness being and what you see as important. So please do really have a good conversation with the team in those smaller groups as well. And we'll ding the bell in kind of 15 minutes to bring you back together.
On the bright side.
I get another chance to ring the bell. That's just to announce that we're now going offline for the workshop session, and we'll come back online once the workshop session is finished. Great. Thanks very much, everybody. Now we're moving on. Back to you, David. Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. Yes, we are.
Thank you. That was really interesting, the pieces of the conversation that I heard. So thank you very much for being engaged and interested in this really important topic. We obviously in the last 20 minutes haven't solved homelessness, so this is one of many conversations that we'll need to have over the next months and years. But those the insights that you shared are really important. The next steps for our homelessness response, we will come back to the committee in November with a paper recommending our next steps and actions to include in the Housing Action Plan to strengthen our response to homelessness in the city. We will cost those and provide you with some information then as well. You can expect in that paper in November to see the conversations and the insights that you've shared today reflected in the recommendations that we have. So thank you very much. And any other thoughts that you have, feel free to fire them through, and we will come back to you as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. The purpose of the workshop today obviously was to align everybody's thinking so that when we bring a paper to you on the 30th of November, we sort of minimise the questions on those updates and make that as seamless as possible for everybody. But as David says, for any of the items in the Housing Action Plan, if you have any questions in the period in between, feel free to send them through and we'll try to respond to them. But yeah, look, thank you very much for engaging in the process, and we look forward to seeing you on the 30th of November.
Thank you. That's it, right? Okay, I get to ring the bell one last time. That's it.